Video. In this module, I am going to discuss about the approach to examination of respiratory system. As you all know, with the availability of X-ray chest, CT scan and now bedside lung ultrasound, there has been a significant decline in the interest in the examination of respiratory system. What I am going to do in this talk, I am going to highlight the importance of examination of respiratory system and would like to reiterate that if you follow a correct methodology and systematically approach examination of a patient who comes to you with symptoms suggestive of respiratory system, you will be able to diagnose the underlying disease in majority of cases. And examination, physical examination of respiratory system will supplement to other investigation. So before we start or move into the examination of respiratory system, let us first understand the scope of examination. Now, what you basically diagnose when you examine a patient with respiratory system. We know that what we do basically is a physical diagnosis, and this diagnosis can be broadly divided into three categories, that is the pleural diseases. In the pleural diseases, your patient can have either pleural effusion, pneumothorax, hydropneumothorax or thickened pleura. Or your patient can have a parenchymal disease which is unilateral, and in unilateral most of the physical diagnoses which you are going to make are consolidation, collapse, fibrosis, destroyed lung and a mass lesion. And then you may have patient who may have symmetrical, bilateral and diffuse diseases, and they can be diffuse airway diseases like asthma and COPD, or they can have diffuse pulmonary lung diseases, DPLDs. Now, in this situation, if you broadly look into this, then you have 4 possible pleural diseases, about 4 to 5 parenchymal diseases, and then diffuse airway as well as the parenchymal diseases. So overall, when you are approaching a patient and you do the physical examination, you have about 11 to 12 possible diagnoses, and this is the scope for the examination, physical examination of the patient. Now, when you start examining your patient, it is very important to go systematically. And the examination has been divided into 4 steps, conventional steps you are all aware of. These are inspection, palpation, percussion and auscultation. Now, once you start inspection, it is very important that you should follow a particular order. The importance of this order is that when you use the first examination in inspection, it creates for you a list of differential diagnoses, and then the subsequent examination would help you in narrowing down this differential diagnosis. So if you look into the inspection, it is very important to go in this order. You should always start with movement, because movements tell you which side is diseased. Either the movements are absolutely decreased or they are normal. So, or they can be unilaterally diseased. So it helps you in selecting the side of the disease. Then you go for the size, then shape, then you look for the position of the mediastinum. Activity of the accessory muscles tell you a differentiation between airway and diffuse parenchymal diseases. You can also look for signs of airflow obstruction on inspection, and also signs for thickened pleura. So this inspection has a set pattern of signs which needs to be examined in a systematical order. Now, you can see here from this cartoon that the lungs usually here, as you can see, that during exhalation the diaphragm goes up, the chest wall moves in and the lungs become smaller, and during inspiration the diaphragm goes down, the chest wall moves out, and the overall both sides of the thorax become bigger. Now, when a person breathes, he takes in a volume, each breath, which we call as tidal volume, which is uniformly distributed in both lungs. So, in normal condition, there is a bilateral uniform expansion of the chest, and this expansion varies something between 4 to 6 centimeters with an average of 5 centimeters. Now, when we examine the first sign on inspection, that is the movement. Now, movement can be restricted either on one side, or it can be restricted completely on one side, or it is restricted on a localized area of one hemithorax, or movement can be restricted on both sides bilaterally, equally and symmetrical. Now, when the movement is restricted on one side, that indicates that the disease belongs to that side. It is very important to see the extent of restriction of the movement. If you find that the whole hemithorax is affected and the movements are relatively or completely absent on one hemithorax, then this indicates that either this patient has a pleural disease like massive pleural effusion, pneumothorax, hydropneumothorax, or thickened pleura. The other parenchymal conditions which are associated with complete loss of movement of one hemithorax are the parenchymal diseases which involves the whole lung, like total lung collapse, consolidation, which is not a very common condition to see, or extensive fibrocavitary disease or destroyed lung. Now, in this situation, the movements will be restricted anteriorly, laterally and posteriorly, right from above downwards. When a particular segment or a lobe of the lung is involved, then movements may be localized to the surface anatomy of that lobe. So, if the movements are localized either interiorly or posteriorly, then most likely this patient has got a localized parenchymal disease. Now, as we all know, the surface anatomy of the upper lobe involves anteriorly the areas, apical areas, it involves clavicular area, subclavicular area, memory area, and posteriorly suprascapular and intrascapular area. The lower lobe occupies mainly the lower part posteriorly as well as the lower part of the lateral regions, and in between the upper lobe and this lower lobe area we have the middle lobe area. So, if the movements are restricted to a particular surface anatomy on the hemithorax corresponding to a particular lobe, then this patient may be having either a lobar consolidation, collapse, mass lesion, or a localized fibrosis. Then there are situations when the movements may be restricted equally on both sides, but they are reduced this thing. As I mentioned to you earlier, that the usual movement on both sides varies from 4 to 6 centimeters. So, if we take an average of 5 centimeters movement bilaterally, then each hemithorax will be moving almost equal to 2.5 centimeters in an average adult. So, if the movements are significantly reduced from this and they are symmetrical and equal on both sides, then this patient is either suffering from a diffuse airway disease like COPD, emphysema, or diffuse parenchymal pulmonary diseases. So, movement helps us not only in localizing the side of the disease, but from the extent of the loss of movement, you can actually say whether the whole lung is involved or it is a pleural disease, because pleura is all along, it's one cavity which is there from anterior to lateral to posterior from above downward. So, all pleural conditions, whether pneumothorax, massive effusion, hydropneumothorax or thickened pleura, would affect the movement of that hemithorax significantly. So, movement is a very, very important sign to be seen to decide whether your patient has a pleural disease, a total parenchymal disease, or a localized parenchymal disease. Movements can also tell you whether your patient has bilaterally symmetrical diseases. So here is another cartoon which tells you about how the size of the hemithorax or both hemithoraces is maintained. We know here that the thorax has a pleural cavity. This pleural space, as you can see here, has a negative pressure. Because of this negative pressure, it keeps the lungs expanded, and it also pulls the chest wall inward and the diaphragm upward. So under normal physiological condition, due to this negative pleural pressures, the lungs are kept expanded, the chest wall is pulled inside, and diaphragms are kept up. So whenever this pressure is disturbed, that means if the pleural pressure becomes zero, as we see in pneumothorax, the lungs would go to their resting position, which is close to the hilum, and the chest wall will spring outside and go to their resting position, and diaphragm will come down. So this would result in enlargement of that hemithorax. So here you can see again in this cartoon that under normal circumstances, the negative pleural pressure tends to keep the lung expanded, and the lungs always want to go to their resting position near the hilum, and the chest wall wants to go outside. And under normal physiological condition, at normal end expiration, the elastic recoils of chest wall and lungs are equal and opposite. So that's how we measure the size of the thorax or the hemithorax under normal condition at end expiration. Now what happens to the size? If you find a unilateral large hemithorax. Now when we say one hemithorax is large, it is very important to say that that hemithorax is large. Otherwise, it can be that that hemithorax is normal and the other hemithorax is small. So we decide that a particular hemithorax is large or small when the movements are restricted on that side, because with the movement sign before this, we have already decided which side is diseased. So if we have a unilateral large hemithorax, as I mentioned to you, because of the zero pressure or a positive pressure in the pleura, the lung has gone to its resting position, the chest wall has gone to its resting position, which is outside, the hemithorax becomes bigger. So the differential diagnosis of a unilateral large hemithorax would be pneumothorax, hydropneumothorax, and even large pleural effusion can also result in a unilaterally large hemithorax. Now, on the other hand, if you have a unilateral small hemithorax, we say it's small because there are the movements are also restricted on that side. As I mentioned to you that the size of the hemithorax depends on the pleural pressures and the compliance of lung and the chest wall. So in most of the situation when there is a fibrosis or there is a collapse with the compensatory emphysema of the resting lung, again the compliance of that lung is lower, the hemithorax will become smaller because of the poor compliance with the same pleural pressure. The lung volume will be smaller and the hemithorax and the chest wall will be pulled further inside. So you will have when you have a unilaterally small hemithorax with restriction of movement on that side, the diagnosis would be either collapse or fibrosis. Then you can have bilaterally large hemithoraces, as I mentioned to you, when particularly in situations of emphysema, when the compliance of the lung increases with the same pleural pressure, the lung volume and the size becomes bigger, the chest wall moves out to its resting position, and you have bilateral large hemithoraces, what we also call as barrel chest. On the other hand, similarly you can have bilaterally small hemithorax when there is a diffuse parenchymal disease on both sides, like interstitial lung diseases, left ventricular failure. In these cases, there is a decrease in the compliance of the lungs become smaller, the chest wall are pulled in, and you have bilateral hemithoraces. So a combination of movement and the size can give you a fairly good idea about what your patient is likely to be suffering from. The next sign which you should look on inspection is the shape of the hemithorax, and shape of the hemithorax is decided by the chest wall. So if there is any pathology which will involve the chest wall, particularly when there is a fibrosis, there is a pleural fibrosis involving the parietal pleura and the chest wall, which will result in fibrosis and contracture of the intercostal spaces, then it will lead to deformity. So when you have a unilateral small hemithorax with deformity, then the most likely diagnosis is a thickened pleura. So in thickened pleura, basically it is a contraction of the chest wall. So this would result in deformity, loss of the regular contour of the chest wall, and this will be usually compensated by a scoliosis with a concavity facing to the same side, as well as the downward movement of the shoulder on that side. So the patient will come with a very typical posture, and you can actually make a spot diagnosis for significant thickened pleura when a patient walks into your office. If you have a localized bulge, then it can be due to mass lesion which is eroding the chest wall, and other deformities should also be looked for, like kyphosis, scoliosis, barrel chest, and these things. So this cartoon shows you different types of deformities. As you can see there, you have normal chest, you have barrel shaped chest where both anterior and lateral diameter becomes almost equal, and you have funnel shaped chest, you have a pigeon chest, and you can see the kyphoscoliosis. In kyphoscoliosis there is a deformity, and the one side the shoulder will be much lower, the contour of the chest wall would change, and there will be a kind of skin fold you will see on that side. Next we go to the position of the mediastinum. The position of the mediastinum tells you about the volume of individual hemithoraces. Now, if you, I can just tell you from the physiological principle, if one hemithorax is small and there is a restriction of movement, then there is an every likelihood that mediastinum will be shifted to the same side. Normally, we see shifting of the mediastinum through trachea, by finding the position of the trachea, and from the position of the apex bead. They are shifted to the side of the disease when there is a volume loss on that side, and that usually we see due to collapse, fibrosis and destroyed lung, or it can be shifted to the other side as happens in pneumothorax. Now in pneumothorax, because normally what we have is both pleural pressures are negative, and in the pneumothorax, the side of the pneumothorax, the pleural pressure is either 0 or it is positive. So it is actually the negative force of the other side which pulls the mediastinum to that side. So you have pneumothorax or large pleural effusion, the mediastinum can be shifted. In situations like consolidation, mass lesions, as well as mild to moderate pleural effusion, the mediastinum may not be significantly shifted. You should also on inspection look for the activity of the accessory muscles. We all know that we have two types of accessory muscles, the accessory muscles of inspiration and accessory muscles of expiration. The accessory muscles of inspiration are mainly the strap muscles of the neck, and they are active when the lungs compliance is significantly reduced. So if you see only a significant activity of the inspiratory muscles, then this patient probably has a disease which has significantly decreased the compliance of the lung, such as diffuse parenchymal lung diseases or left ventricular failure. On the other hand, if a patient has both prominence of both inspiratory muscles of the accessory muscles of inspiration as well as the accessory muscles of expiration, which are the interior abdominal muscles, then it is most likely due to obstructive airway disease. Now you may ask, what is the reason why the muscles of inspiration are prominent in patients with obstructive airway disease such as asthma or COPD? Now most of the patients with asthma and COPD, when they have airflow obstruction, To overcome this obstruction, they develop hyperinflation. And by hyperinflation, they tend to open up their airways, and this hyperinflation leads to fall in the compliance of the chest wall as well as the lung. So this resistive load is actually converted into elastic load. So patients with obstructive airway disease will show both the prominence of accessory muscles of inspiration as well as the prominent muscles of expiration, which is the interior abdominal muscle. And when they try to breathe out, you will see the interior abdominal muscle contracting and squeezing out the air through these narrowed or bronchospastic airways. So just to make you understand the concept of size, it is a little important to see some X-rays which can give you an idea of how you can see them clinically. So you can see here that in this X-ray, this patient has a pneumothorax on the right side, and you can see that the lung has actually gone towards hilum, and in fact it has and the mediastinum is shifted to the other side. The chest wall has gone outside, the diaphragm has gone down. So this shows how the hemithorax on that side has become much bigger. So if you measure each hemithorax, the hemithorax on the right side will be much bigger. Similarly, if you see here, again, each hemithorax looks bigger here. The diaphragms are low, the chest wall are out, and this is what we typically see in emphysema, where there is a significant increase in the compliance of the lung and the chest wall moves in. There is another case where you can see that both hemithoraces looks very big, the diaphragms are down, the chest wall are out, again seen in patient with emphysema, a typical barrel-shaped chest. This is another case here. You can see that the right hemithorax, which is usually bigger than the left hemithorax here, you can see that the right hemithorax looks smaller, particularly if you see in the upper part of the right hemithorax as comparison to the left hemithorax here. So there is a reduction in the size, and the diaphragm is also relatively gone up, the chest wall has gone in. So this indicates that there is a condition which has caused volume loss. So here you can see this patient has significant fibrosis following tuberculosis. The another patient, you can see there is the small hemithorax on the right side, again seeing from this X-ray. Another patient with complete destroyed lung here, you can see that the left hemithorax has become much smaller, the diaphragms have gone out, the mediastinum has shifted, and the whole hemithorax size will be much smaller in these cases. Another situation here, you can see that as comparison to the right lung, the left lung size appears much smaller, the diaphragm is shifted, and the diaphragm has gone up and the mediastinum is shifted. So again indicating some volume loss, and here the volume loss is due to the left lower lobe collapse, as you can see a triangular shadow behind this thing. So this is a patient with the pleural effusion and preserved lung volume. The another case of total lung collapse here with the volume loss. So another patient with the total lung collapse and volume loss, and this is a very typical presentation of a patient with thickened pleura. So here not only you see that there is a significant reduction in the size of hemithorax, but also there is a deformity of the chest wall, as can be seen with marked crowding of the ribs and the loss of contour of the chest on the left side. So these X-rays will give you an idea that when we are clinically examining our patient and look for the size, how the size is interpreted in various physical diagnosis. I would now like to show you, this is a patient with diffuse interstitial lung disease. Both lungs look smaller, the diaphragms have gone up, the chest wall has moved in. Again, this is another example of finding this thing. So this is a case where you have, as you can see, this is a case of right middle lobe pneumonia, and you can see that both the hemithorax sizes are normal, the diaphragms are normally placed, the hemithorax are equal in size. So again indicating no loss of lung volume here. Again, a patient with upper lobe pneumonia with preserved lung volume, so the size of the lungs are preserved. So now the same thing if you try to see on the patients here. So you can see here, the presentation is very subtle. So if you try to see this patient, then you will see that this patient's right shoulder is slightly lower than the left shoulder. If you look into the nipple, which is the right nipple looks lower than the left nipple, and also the axillary fold, if you will see, is lower on the right side than comparison to the left side. And if you examine this patient posteriorly, then again you will see that the right shoulder is lower than the left shoulder, the right axillary fold is lower, and the chest wall is more in the right arm is more in contact with the chest wall than the left arm, and there is a prominence of scapula. So all these features tells you that this patient has a small hemithorax on the right side, and most likely this patient has either a collapse of one of the lobes or a fibrocavity disease here. So if you will see this patient's X-ray, then you can see that this patient has a almost destroyed lung of the right side. So you can correlate the size of the hemithorax on X-ray and with the clinical examination by looking into various important landmarks on the chest wall to appreciate the size of the hemithorax. Just to reiterate, there is another example here of a child. Again, if you see it very carefully, again the right shoulder appears slightly lower than the left shoulder. Look into the nipples, the right nipple looks slightly lower. Again look into the axillary fold, this looks slightly lower on the right side. So it's a very subtle presentation of the size of the hemithorax, and you can see that the right hemithorax appears to be smaller in this case. Again, posteriorly you will be able to appreciate it much better. You can see here the right shoulder is slightly lower, the right axillary fold is lower than the left axillary fold, and you see very clearly the prominence of the scapula. And if you also see the arms and the chest wall, you will see that the air column, the diamond shaped air column which comes between the arm and the chest wall is much lower on the right side as comparison to the left side, indicating a small hemithorax on the right side and a more contact of the arm with the chest wall. So by looking into this thing very closely, and if you are very observant, then you are able to look into the size of the hemithorax very clearly. Similarly, another example where you can see that the right axillary fold, the right nipple, the right shoulder is grossly lower. So the more grossly these signs are appreciated, indicate a significant loss. So this patient has undergone pneumonectomy on the right side. So you can see from this posture, you can make out that his shoulders are low, the nipples are low. So there is a volume loss on this thing. And again, you can see the surgical scar mark of lobectomy, or I think pneumonectomy this patient has undergone for tuberculosis in the past. So you can see a change like this thing. So now what about this patient when you are trying to see this patient? Now this patient is a spot diagnosis. When you have a patient who walks into your office with gross deformity. Now what is the chest wall deformity here is, the shoulder is significantly lower, the right shoulder, than the left. The right axillary fold and nipples are lower, and you will see that these patients, their hemithorax is much smaller, and when it is contracted, and if you try to see them posteriorly, you will find a fold of skin. Now I will show you it. Now if you can see here on the right side, this fold of the skin, it can be seen, which is absent on the left side. So this is a classical case, a spot diagnosis for a patient with thickened pleura. So this is what you can see on inspection for the size of the hemithorax. Then on inspection, you can also look for signs of airflow obstruction. So if your patient has airflow obstruction, then these can be seen on inspection. As I already mentioned to you, they will have prominent accessory muscles of inspiration as well as expiration. Since they have significant airflow obstruction. So they will, in order to maintain a given tidal volume, they will create extra negative pressure in their pleura during inspiration and extra positive pressure during expiration to breathe out. So they will show this marked fluctuation in their pleural pressure with when there is an extra negative during inspiration, they will have intercostal indrawing during inspiration, and when they have extra positive pressure during expiration, they will have intercostal bulging. There can be also supraclavicular excavation due to the negative pressure which is sucked in, and that even the trachea as a whole can be sucked in with each inspiration, or it can be significantly sucked in with the hyperinflation. So you may find that the extrathoracic length of the trachea may be reduced. So you will have either tracheal tug or shortening of the suprasternal length of the trachea, and then at the end, when there is a gross hyperinflation, when the diaphragms have gone down, they have become straight. In that situation, normally what we see is an expansion of the chest wall in the lower area during inspiration. In these cases, because their diaphragms have become flat, they actually pull in the chest wall during inspiration. So you will have a paradoxical inward movement of the lower chest wall. These signs which I have just mentioned to you actually indicate the severity of airflow obstruction, and as you find more and more of them, that indicate that this patient has a very severe airflow obstruction. So on inspection, not only you can diagnose airflow obstruction, but you can also quantitate quite well the severity of airflow obstruction, and you can judge the emergency of the situation. So I have just completed inspection, and as I have mentioned to you, if you want to get the maximum out of your inspection, then you have to follow your examination and looking into those signs in a sequence, as I mentioned to you, and the same thing which I am going to reiterate on this diagnostic algorithm. So once you have a patient, when you are doing their inspection, the first thing which you should see is the movement, because movement is the one which tells you that which side is diseased and how much it is diseased. So you have three options when you look for the movement. Either the movements are completely restricted in a given hemithorax, or there can be a localized restriction of movement in that hemithorax, or there can be a bilateral equal reduction in movements. So on the basis of movement, you divide your 11 conditions which I mentioned to you, 4 pleural, 5 parenchymal and diffuse lung diseases, into 3 subcategories. So what you will see, if there is a restriction of movement of complete one hemithorax, then probably you are dealing with all the 4 pleural conditions like pneumothorax, hydropneumothorax, pleural effusion or thickened pleura, or this patient has a disease involving the whole lung like total lung collapse, destroyed lung, and maybe a total lung consolidation, which is not a very common thing to see. The other situation is when the patient has localized restriction, then as per the surface anatomy of the restriction, this patient may have one of the lobar collapse or consolidation or fibrosis. The third situation is when the movements are restricted equally on both sides, then your patient may be having either diffuse airflow obstructions like asthma or COPD, or they are suffering from diffuse parenchymal restrictive lung disorders like interstitial lung disease or left ventricular failure. Now once you have divided on the basis of movement your patient into 3 groups, then you go for your next sign, which is the size. Now size can be either normal or it can be large or small. Now if the size is large, then as I mentioned to you, you can subdivide the above condition into pneumothorax and hydropneumothorax. In both the situation, because pneumothorax is the only condition in which you can have a unilateral increase in the size of hemithorax. If the hemithorax is small on that side, then either it is a thickened pleura, total lung collapse or destroyed lung, and if it is normal, then either it is a consolidation or mild to moderate effusion. So usually massive effusions will have an increase in the size of the hemothorax. A mild to moderate effusion, the size may be preserved. Similarly, when you have a localized movement, again you look for the size. If the size is small, then either it is a lobar collapse or fibrosis. If the size is normal, it is due to consolidation. And the third thing, after the size, you should look for the shape. And if the shape is normal, then it is the patient has either collapse or destroyed lung, or if the shape is normal, that also indicate that this patient is most likely having parenchymal disease, because shape is deformed in patient with pleural disease and particularly the thickened pleura. So this way you can follow in a sequence of movement, size and shape. You will be able to narrow down your differential diagnosis sequentially, and ultimately at the end of inspection, I would say in majority of cases, you will be able to make a diagnosis of your patient, either complete diagnosis or maybe at best 2 differential diagnoses you should be able to make. Now, when we are dealing with the bilateral equal reduction in the movement, you look for the accessory muscles there, and if you have inspiratory muscles of accessory muscles of inspiration which are more prominent, then most likely you have DPLD, and if you have both inspiratory and expiratory accessory muscles which are prominent, then you are probably dealing with airflow obstruction. So I think this algorithm can guide you very well in the systematic approach to examination of a patient on inspection. So we have just covered the inspection, and you know how important the inspection is, and with the inspection you will be able to narrow down your most differential diagnosis. So this way it can give you an idea that most of the respiratory conditions can be a spot diagnosis, because by being very observant, by doing a very thorough inspection, you will be able to know a lot of information and able to make a differential diagnosis for your patient. So after the inspection, now we go to the palpation. Now the question is, what addition we are going to do on palpation after inspection? Now inspection is basically a subjective examination. You just observe your patient, you observe the movement and see that movements are reduced or they are normal. You are observing the size of the hemithorax, you are saying the size is large or small, or you are looking into the shape. But when you do the palpation, you are actually giving objective parameters. Now on inspection, when you say the movements are reduced, on palpation you will tell how much movement is reduced. So you will use a measuring tape, and then with that, each full hemithorax you take the total expansion, total size, total inspiratory movement, and then you measure it on each hemithorax. So on palpation, basically you are confirming the findings of inspection. You can also give the value. So you are telling exactly how much the movements are reduced. That will help you in quantifying the severity of disability this patient has developed. So palpation basically gives objective values to what we see on inspection. So many times, if the patient has a milder loss of lung function, if there is a milder fibrosis, or if there is a little pleural effusion, or if the patient has a segmental collapse or this thing, sometimes you may not be able to appreciate that on inspection, because the change in the size of the movement may be very subtle. So palpation helps you in actually identifying these patients, because you are actually measuring movement on both sides, and the difference in the movement on both sides of even half centimeter on 1 centimeter can give you an idea that this patient may be having this thing. So inspection and palpation are complementary, and they should be done together if there are some doubts during inspection. Next, so what we are basically doing on palpation is we will be doing the same steps. You will look into the movement, you will look into the size, you will tell how much it is smaller, that you are going to mention. You will also look into the shape, mediastinal position. You will actually you can use your fingers and hand to appreciate the position of apex beat and the trachea and tell the shift of the mediastinum. But what I can tell you, that if your patient has a small hemithorax with reduced movement on a particular side, then there should be an every likelihood that the mediastinum has to be shifted to that side, and also the diaphragm in that hemithorax will be higher than normal position, because the volume loss is actually compensated by inward movement of the chest wall, by shift of the mediastinum, as well as by the upward movement of the diaphragm. So all participate depending upon their relative compliance and physical structure. You will see a change in this thing. The another important thing what you see on palpation is the vocal fragmentus. Now vocal fragmentus is the appreciation of the sound with your hand. It is not, this sound you are not going to appreciate with your ears, but by putting your hand on the chest of the patient, you will try to appreciate. So this tells you the capability of your hand to appreciate the sound vibration. And we know that our hand only appreciates low frequency sounds, and under normal circumstances, the low frequency sounds are transmitted across our lungs on the chest wall. So presence of vocal fragmentus is a normal finding. So what is important is with vocal fragmentus is its absence. So when the vocal fragmentus is absent, then it becomes much more important, and it is characteristically absent or lower in patients with pleural effusion and pneumothorax. So you can see here there are different methods which have been depicted to look for the position of the trachea, which people can use. And vocal fragmentus, as I have already mentioned to you, it is markedly reduced or absent in patients with pleural effusion and pneumothorax, and in other conditions it may be preserved. You must have heard people saying vocal fragmentus is increased. As I told you that there are certain conditions like consolidation and mass lesion where higher frequency sounds can be transmitted across the chest wall. Now even though high frequencies are transmitted, our hand has a limitation of only appreciating low frequency sound. So if in a particular individual case your range of appreciation may vary. So some people may feel a difference in the vocal fragmentus on two hemithoraces when somebody's range of appreciation of these frequencies is higher. But normally the vocal fragmentus is more important by its absence rather than its presence. Thank you for your kind attention.